Okay, review part 4 on the Eachine Airloader. I'm at part 4 because part 3 didn't go very well. If you watch the review part 3 video, you know that the motor blew up on this aircraft while I was inverted performing a roll. So I did not get to learn a lot from my previous adjustments on this plane, other than tying those flaps up to the trailing edge, level with the trailing edge of the wing, because they were hanging down about, I don't know, 2 or 3 millimeters. Tying those up and going full throttle took care of the zooming that the plane had. Once I throttled up to full throttle on a speed run, it wanted to climb ever so slightly. And so in review part 3, I performed a speed run with the flaps tied up level with the trailing edge of the wing, and it appeared like it took care of that issue. It seemed like it held its line very well. I had increased the dual rates on the ailerons before the last flight, review part 3, from 70% to 85%. I really didn't get to test the roll completely because, like I said, the motor blew up when I was performing the roll, but it did still look kind of slow to me. So the only adjustment that I've made since the last flight is that I've increased the dual rates on the aileron from 85% to 100%, and I've replaced the motor. I replaced the motor with a Racer Star 2216 1400 kV. The stock motor is a 2216 1300 kV. I'm not gonna denigrate the motor, the brand of the motor that I had on this plane, because sometimes you just end up getting a bad one. But if you go to the link that I have in the show notes and look at the suggested components for the kit, they have a link there to the motor, and you'll see exactly what motor was on this. Even though there were no markings on that motor, I know exactly what it was by going to that link. So Racer Star motors, I've never had a Racer Star motor fail on me yet, and I have a lot of flights on Racer Star motors, and I have a lot of Racer Star motors. So I'm really not concerned about this motor blowing up on me the way the stock motor did. The only concern that I have now is, and the reason I don't recommend this motor, is because it has a very large diameter shaft. I don't know why they did that, but it's like a 7mm shaft. And so I have the same prop that I had on the stock motor. It's a Gemfan 8x3.8 two-blade ABS prop, but I had to bore out the center hole to get that prop mounted on this motor. So my only concern now, since I had to take a lot of material out of the hub, is the prop going to fly apart on me. Hopefully not, but we'll see. So if I can get through this flight session without incident, if I don't have a component failure, I'll be able to give you my conclusion on the Eachine Airloader. And there is at least one modification I would like to make to this plane after the review, but I like to do the review with the plane as stock as possible, with just minor adjustments on it. So we're ready to launch again. So I will see you out at the field. Oh, and then after the flight session, when we get back here and I give you my conclusion, I will give you some close-up shots of that stock motor. I have never seen a motor do that before. So you'll get to see exactly what happened to that motor when we get back here. So see you out the field.
Okay, Eachine Airloader review part 4, another test flight, new motor, and I did rebalance this prop after boring out that hub. So everything should be good to go. Let's see what we've got. So far, so good. The roll rate might be a little bit better. Looks like I'm going to have to change the linkage on it. Obviously better going with the torque than going against the torque. Oh, well, that's a lot more power, isn't it? Compared to the stock motor. Of course, the stock motor, I think, had problems from the beginning. That was pretty sweet. Oh yeah, how about that? Split S. I know that's not what this plane was designed for, but that's the way I like to fly. Okay, so let's come back through here. We'll gain some altitude. See what a stall looks like. Huh. That wasn't bad. Let's try that again. It just kind of circled on me. Well, it just kind of dropped its nose, didn't it? I'll try that one more time. Throttle it up, gauge some altitude. It just dropped its nose. Huh. I don't know. I didn't make any modifications to the wing. Let's see what a vertical stall looks like. Again, it dropped its nose. Huh. I can't tell you. I can't tell you why it's not tip stalling. I can tell you that I have my balance right on the CG, and I have it neutrally balanced. There's my timer. Let's do a couple more rolls and loops with it before I call it quits. Not bad. I would like a faster roll rate. I think I will change my linkage on the ailerons and increase my expo a little bit. Nice loop. And of course we did a split S maneuver with it. That was fine. Alright, well, let's bring it around and bring it in. Or somebody comes through here. I'm just coasting, just whoop. Ah! Didn't get to the center of the lane, but it's a tough big bird. I just didn't keep my speed up and it got a little wing wag there at the end. But oddly enough, I didn't get any dramatic tip stall out of it. You guys saw that, right? I mean, I did a vertical stall. I had it, you know, climbing completely vertically, and then when it ran out of steam, it just dropped its nose. I just centered the stick and then pulled it back up again. When I did just a traditional stall where I slowly brought the nose up and decreased throttle, again, it just dropped its nose. It didn't drop a wing. And I did that, what, 2-3 times? Testing that because I was certainly expecting it.
Okay, so review part 4 and this test flight definitely beat my expectations. Now, I was as surprised as probably anyone watching this video after seeing many other videos of flights with this plane. Why did I not have these dramatic tip stalls? Why did I have no drama stalls on this plane? Because I was fully expecting to have a dramatic tip stall after watching other videos, and that's why I had so much altitude on the plane when I was performing the stall test. I don't know. I wish I had a definitive answer for you, but I do not know. I can only guess, make an educated guess at why I had these no drama stalls with this plane, and I think that it is attributable to 2 different things, because I didn't modify anything on this plane other than replacing the stock prop and the stock motor, which I didn't have any choice in replacing the stock motor. It was junk. But the only 2 things that I can attribute it to is the fact that I have always flown my planes with a completely neutral balance on the CG, and the CG marks on the wings that they set for this plane seemed to be spot on. The way the plane was handling when I was flying it, the way it behaved, the way it performed maneuvers, it felt completely balanced where it should be balanced on those CG marks. So that's number 1. That's one thing that I attribute it to, is the fact that I have the plane completely neutrally balanced on the CG mark, so that when I put my fingers underneath the wings and I lift the plane up, the plane stays completely level. The tail doesn't move, the nose doesn't move. It's in a completely level horizontal position. That's the way I balance my planes, no matter what type of plane it is, whether it's a traditional plane or whether it's a park jet. So that's number 1. Number 2, I was concerned about the fact that the flaps on the main wings were hanging about 2 or 3 millimeters lower than the trailing edge of the wing and below the neutral position of the ailerons. I didn't like that. So I repositioned those flaps, because on the first couple of flights, test flights that I had, when those flaps were hanging down 2 or 3 millimeters, you saw that when I went full throttle, it would gradually increase altitude. So I wanted to remove that characteristic from the plane. So I think having the flaps in a neutral position and balancing the plane completely neutral on the CG are the only 2 things that I can attribute to the fact that I had these no drama stalls on this plane. I could be wrong, but that is my best educated guess on why this thing had such docile stalls on it during this test flight. You also saw that, you know, I can't say if the stock motor had adequate power because it had problems from the very beginning. I mentioned during the first couple of test flights that it just something didn't sound healthy, but I couldn't pinpoint it. I didn't know if it was the motor or if it was the prop, and it turned out to be the motor. Now, this is the largest, heaviest plane that I have flown so far. So I don't know if you could tell it or not, but I was pretty nervous on every one of the flights. Today just being my 5th flight on this plane. And so, you know, in review number 3, when the motor blew up, I mean, I'm already nervous flying it. I'm performing a roll, and while I'm inverted in the roll, the motor blows up. So talk about kicking, you know, nervous up 2 or 3 notches. That certainly did it. And the only time that I had a tip stall on this plane was during that flight where I was trying to glide it back dead stick. Now, if I had more experience with planes of this size, I wouldn't have tried to make that downwind turn to come in. I would have gone ahead and landed the plane downwind. But it looked like when I crossed the road, it looked like I had enough altitude and enough forward momentum that I was going to be able to make that last turn and land it on the road dead stick. That turned out not to be the case, because when I made the turn, it completely lost steam at that point. And then of course it did tip stall because I wasn't straight and level with the plane when it lost steam, and I think any plane is going to do that. But you saw today under power, and on one of those tests I completely cut the throttle completely and pulled back on the elevator. I think that was the very first stall test where I cut the motor completely and pulled the nose up, and then you just got this kind of a lazy circle, and that was it. And then the other 2 stalls that I tested on it, I left in about, I don't know, about 25% throttle and pulled the nose up, and then all it did was drop the nose and go on. And even during the vertical stall test, where I pulled it completely vertical, it lost steam, and then the nose just swung down. I centered the stick and then just pulled it back up and applied throttle. So it was, all of those stalls were completely devoid of any drama, which is the way I like it. So now I can be a lot more comfortable with this plane, knowing what its stall characteristic is going to be based on my CG balance and the fact that I have these flaps up in a neutral position. So, but did you see the power on the vertical climb, and with the loops and with the split S maneuver? The rolls are still a little lethargic, so I need to change the linkage on the ailerons to get a better roll rate. Like I said, I know that that's not what this plane was designed to do, but I want to make it as maneuverable and aerobatic as I can, because I like to fly. Even though I love flying FPV, I like close proximity and aerobatic flight rather than straight and level long range, ultra long range FPV. So I like the power of the Racer Star motor with this prop. It has plenty of power for aerobatics. I was so concentrated, I was so surprised by the no drama stalls that I wanted to do more stalls, and I completely forgot about testing any stall turns with it. So the next time I take it out, I'll perform some stall turns with it to see what kind of adjustments I need on my rudder, if I need more rudder, if I have adequate rudder. But I'm definitely going to take it out and perform some more maneuvers on it, aerobatic maneuvers. Next time I take it out, I'll be a lot more comfortable with it. Now that I know the predictability of the plane if I do stall it. It is with the stock prop. It is a fairly efficient power system with a 22/16 1300 kV motor. If the motor had not been junk on this plane when I received it, I think that a 22/16 1300 kV motor with the stock prop will give adequate power for basic aerobatic maneuvers, and it's a conservative enough on amp draw at about 50% throttle that I think this is going to be a very good long-range FPV plane. I love the fact that it has all that room in the and the fuselage. I mean, I think this is the first factory plane I've ever had that had more room in the fuselage than I was able to use, you know, so that's nice. I also found that throttling this up to about 70% throttle, giving it a good chuck with a slight upward angle, and it takes off fine every time. It's a bit of a bear for me to grip on launch, but giving it just a good chuck and a slight upward angle with 70% throttle, it takes right off, no problem whatsoever. Now on the landing, I did slow down too much, got a little bit of wing wag, and drifted over to the left on the lane. But this fuselage, this airframe has proven itself to be fairly durable within reason. And if you watch the review part 3 where the motor blew up on it and I stalled it there at the end, it nosed in pretty good, and I didn't have any damage on the plane other than it cracked that little grill on the very front, and that was it. So my conclusion on this plane, I do not recommend the plug and fly version based on the motor that came with this. It was absolutely junk from the first flight until it blew up on the 4th flight. So I do not recommend the plug and fly version. I think the airframe is a very good airframe. If you set up your CG balance and make sure that these flaps are in neutral position, you should have no drama stalls, just like I had. It has, with a, like I said, 2216 1300 kV motor with stock prop. It has adequate power. Very conservative on amp draw at mid throttle. You should be able to get very long range flight with this. When I landed today, I just had a 4S 3300 milliamp LIPO in it. I still had 3.9 volts per cell, and I was hard on the throttle most of the time. So even with the 1400 kV motor and the more aggressive prop on it, so I think it will make a very good long range FPV plane, or a fairly aerobatic close proximity FPV plane or line of sight plane, depending on how you want to use it. That's the way I'm going to use it, as close proximity aerobatic long range FPV plane. I know that's counter to what it's designed for, but that's the way I like to fly it, and I think it's going to perform very well in that role, as well as a long range FPV plane. So I don't, after my flight today, my test flight today, I don't have any qualms in recommending the kit for this plane. And pick your own electronics to put in it. The servos, the speed controller, everything but the motor seem to work fine. If you want to take a chance and order the plug and fly version, have a motor in mind that you're going to replace it with. That's all I can say, because I've never seen a motor blow up like that before, and I've used a lot of motors. So my conclusion is big thumbs up on the airframe. I highly recommend the kit. I do not recommend the plug and fly version. This is not a beginner plane by any stretch of the imagination. I consider myself to have intermediate skill level as an RC pilot. I'm definitely not an advanced RC pilot, and I can fly this plane just fine. If you have intermediate to advanced skill level, you're going to have a lot of fun with this plane. So I will go ahead and I will bring up some close-up shots of the motor. The 3 separate magnets from that motor dropped down out of that bell housing and basically sawed through the coil leads on the motor, shorting the motor out. I've never seen that. I've never seen 3 magnets come loose on a motor all at one time. So I'll show you some close-ups of that. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the air.